Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to the channel. This is Smart TCG, and today I'm going to be going over my top 10 decks currently in the Scarlet and Violet format. Now, with the brand new set just coming out, the metagame has completely shifted, and today I'm going to be going over my current top 10 decks in the standard format. All the deck lists will be in the description, so make sure to go check that out if you're just looking for the lists. And if you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If there's a deck you think I missed, make sure to put in the comments. Let me know if you think that there is a deck that isn't on here that should be. Fight for your deck. All right. Anyways, let's get into number 10 here. All right, hopping into number 10, we have Miraidon. Now, this is a deck that, since its release, has not seen a whole lot of success. However, we saw Robert Kinbrun get top 8 at the European International Championships with this build, and I think it changed a lot of people's mind on the deck. This deck is arguably the most consistent and most aggressive deck in the format, being able to develop your board state almost every single time with that tandem unit, on top of being able to one-shot pretty much anything on turn 1 if you're able to hit an electric generator or 2. This deck in theory is incredibly good. However, it does struggle mightily against a lot of those single prize decks like Lost Zone Tool Box and Gardevoir if they're able to turn themselves into a mostly single prize deck with things like Shining Arcana Gardevoir. So in theory, it's really good. However, its single prize matchup is very, very shaky. However, what you do lose in matchups, you gain so much in consistency and also just pure aggression that I think this deck is actually more viable than people think. I think it deserves its spot on this top 10, and if decks like Lost Zone Toolbox weren't as popular, I could definitely see this deck moving up into maybe the top 5. Your deck strategy, pretty simple, just using the electric generator to be able to power up your Miraidon and also Raikou V, and then you have the Regieleki VMAX, which allows you to be able to one-shot those big VSTAR and VMAX Pokemon with that Photon Blaster. The chromatics are pretty interesting in this list. I actually have really liked them, as oftentimes you have extra item cards you don't need, like extra Nest Balls or Switch cards that you can just simply chromatic away to be able to dig for those electric generators, because your deck is so reliant on that card. That is also one of the flaws this deck can sometimes run into, is if you don't hit energy off electric generator, you obviously play 15, so the odds are likely. If you don't hit an energy off electric generator, sometimes you can just lose games out of nowhere that you probably shouldn't lose, which is one of the bigger issues with this deck. But overall, when it gets set up, it's pretty difficult to beat. All right, let's hop into number 9. Hopping into number 9 here, we have Arceus Giratina. Now, Arceus Giratina is an archetype that has been around for quite some time, and it has remained pretty much the same. The strategy is to use now Judge, it used to be Marnie in the past, paired up with a Path to the Peak to disrupt them, and then pairing Trinity Nova into Lost Impact over and over and over again to tear through their side of the field. I really like this deck because its strategy is incredibly simple and easy to use. You're pretty much able to do what you're supposed to every single game, and it has a very, very high damage cap. You also have the Bibarel for that consistency throughout the game, along with Scovet as well, which is great just to be able to dig a little bit deeper into your deck. Cards like Path are just some of the most degenerate cards ever created in Pokemon, and this is the deck that is able to abuse this pretty much better than any deck in format aside from Mew, which we will go into later. Spoiler alert, Mew's on this list. But anyways, we have Arceus Giratina, still an incredible deck. Judge Path is just incredibly overpowered. All right, let's get into number 8. Hopping to number 8 here, we have the other Giratina build. We have Giratina VSTAR Lost Zone Toolbox. Now, this is a deck that is incredibly powerful, however, does struggle with consistency. What you lose in consistency, though, you do gain back in matchup spreads, as you pretty much have an out to almost every deck. Lost Impact is able to handle most Pokemon in the standard format. However, if you do need to hit a little bit more than 280, you have that Star Requiem. Sableye, Cramorant, and Radiant Greninja provide great single prize attackers in the early, middle, and even late game to be able to power up your Pokemon. You have cards like Mirage Gate to be able to get that Giratina fully powered up, or something like Radiant Greninja. It's actually really nice. You can use Mirage Gate to power up your Lumineon as well to Aqua Return it off the field, which does come up more often than you might think. This is, though, a pretty standard Lost Box deck, using Comfy's Flower Selecting along with Chorus's Experiment to get tons of cards in the Lost Zone to then use the card we already mentioned, Mirage Gate. Gaining Beach Court is great for this deck, as it's a great consistency boost because you did lose Scoop Up Net, so gaining that Beach Court is really, really nice and will help you be able to maneuver your Pokemon around relatively easily. As I said, this deck can sometimes struggle with consistency, but when it gets set up, it's pretty difficult to beat. Along with this, decks like Duraludon and Goodra VSTAR have been gaining popularity, which are decks this deck just pretty much destroys. So anyways, Giratina VSTAR at the number 8 spot. I think it deserves a spot on this list, and I think it's going to go up as decks like Goodra and Duraludon continue to become more popular. All right, let's move on to number 7. Moving on to number 7 here, we have one of the 2 Gardevoir lists, spoiler alert again, that are going to be on this list. I'm saying this because a lot of people seeing this part of the video and not, waiting for the rest would just say, oh, why is this build on but not the rare candy one? Well, there are 2 Gardevoir lists, and I'm going to go over both of them on this list. The reason I am differentiating them is because they are so different in so many different ways. This is a build with Mewtwo V Union. Mewtwo V Union, one of the most powerful cards ever created. However, it is incredibly difficult to get set up. Nowadays, though, you have Kirlia's Refinement along with the Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace to make this easier than it ever has been. Your goal is to use Kirlia's Refinement to be able to discard multiple pieces of the Mewtwo V Union and then use your V Union effect to be able to use that final burn or Psy-Explosion to knock out multiple of your opponent's Pokemon. Now, Psychic Embrace allows this card to become incredibly easy to use, where in the past you had to use its first attack Union gain, which basically said you can't do anything for 1 turn. Now, this deck is incredibly powerful, however, it is much slower than the other Gardevoir variant, which is the reason why it's only at number 7. I think Gardevoir is one of the most powerful decks in format. I just think that the Mewtwo V Union build is slightly weaker because you can't play things like Rare Candy, so you lose kind of that aggression that you normally would want, and on top of it, you have to cut consistency cards to fit in this 4-card package, arguably 5 because you want to play the Peonia as well, and just in case you prize a piece, you can use Peonia to be able to get them out of the prizes. So the biggest issue with this version is that yes, it's incredibly powerful when you get it set up, however, you have to commit at least 5 spots to this V Union combo, which causes you to lose some consistency. Overall though, deck is really good and I think deserves its spot on this top 10. Let's go into number 6. Hopping number 6 here, we have Goodra VSTAR. Now, this is a deck that has been seeing lots of success recently. Goodra was a deck a lot of people forgot about when everyone was trying out the brand new cards like Gardevoir and Miraidon. But as time went on, people realized that this deck is still really good. One of the biggest things about this deck is that it was a Lost Zone variant that didn't really lose a lot from Scoop Up Net, going away. A lot of the more just plain vanilla Lost Zone Mirage Gates decks really had to completely change how they were built when they lost Scoop Up Net. However, this was a deck that didn't necessarily rely a whole lot on Scoop Up Net because once you got one Goodra setup, that's pretty much all you needed. So that's a big reason as to why the deck has been doing so well. Very simple deck using the Comfy's Flower Selecting and Colorless Experiment to get up to 7, just like all the other Lost Zone variants, and then using Mirage Gate to be able to power up Goodra. This deck is really powerful right now because it has a pretty decent Lugia V-Star matchup along with Lost Zone matchup, which are 2 of some of the most popular decks in the format. However, you can really struggle to decks like Gardevoir, which is the only thing holding this deck back right now. And if Lugia V-Star variants start playing the Duraludon plus single strike energies, they're going to be able to hit through Rolling Iron. Other than that, though, cards like Articuno are really cool with that Wild Freeze, being able to paralyze Pokemon, because so many decks right now don't play Switch. So once it gets paralyzed in the active, you pretty much have bought yourself at least 1 to 2 turns, which is really nice. Goodra, one of the better decks in format. However, it can struggle to like cards like the Duraludon VMAX, Gardevoir as well, and also is a little bit slow at times, but it still makes a pretty good deck. Roxanne is a great card as well in the late game paired up with Temple versus many decks in the format as well. I like I'd also mention that. Anyways, number 6, Goodra VSTAR, pretty respectable deck, and I think deserves its spot on this list. Let's go into number 5. All right, hopping to number 5, we're going into pretty much the you can do no wrong part of the list. The top 5 decks are absolutely ridiculously powerful right now, and I think all make incredible choices heading into upcoming tournaments. We got Alex Szymanski's EUIC International winning list here. Arceus VSTAR Duraludon, along with Alolan Vulpix, also known as Arceus Tool Box. You have pretty much everything for any matchup. You're playing against Mew, you got yourself that Drapion. You're playing against something that has no outs to Skyscraper, you got yourself Duraludon VMAX. You got something that only uses ability type Pokemon to attack, you got Alolan Vulpix V STAR. So this is a deck that has pretty much answers to everything. Your goal is to use your Arceus VSTAR's Star Birth to be able to Trinity Nova and power up multiple different types of Pokemon. You have pretty much answers to everything. However, the answers are relatively easy to counter. If Gardevoir simply slaps in a Mimikyu EX, then Snow Mirage isn't as necessarily as powerful as an attack versus that deck, or if they add in a second memory skip Ralts. And if Lugia decks start to play heavy path, then Skyscraper becomes a little less powerful. However, those cards aren't necessarily great to put in either of those decks right now, as they're kind of useless in pretty much every other matchup, which I think is a good reason for this deck to still stay around as one of the strongest decks, is that yes, it can be easily countered. However, the counters aren't necessarily great. It's also a pretty consistent deck as well. As you can see, all of the draw supporters in this deck allow yourself to get set up pretty much every single game. The heavy Lost City is great as a Path to the Peak counter against Mew, and also really good against Lost Zone Toolbox, being able to Lost Zone cards like Radiant Greninja and Radiant Charizard. Overall, this deck is absolutely fantastic, one of the most powerful decks in the format, and once again, shout out to Alex Szymanski for winning the European International Championships with it. All right, let's hop into number 4. Hopping to number 4 here, we have Mew VMAX. Now, Mew VMAX is a deck that has been seen lots of success recently. This is going to be the list that Pablo Meza used to get top 4 at the European International Championships, so shout out to them. And it's pretty simple. Your goal is to use Judge paired up with Path into Technoblast turn after turn and hope they can't set up. You have Power Tablet as well to knock out even the biggest HP Pokemon, and I think that this is by far the best disruption deck in the standard format. Just being able to go Judge Path every single turn paired up with a incredibly powerful attack being Technoblast, this deck pretty much can do no wrong. The only problem with it is that it is very, very weak to Drapion. If they're able to bump the path and use the Drapion, you oftentimes can just instantly lose, which is kind of the issue. However, since your deck is built so much around heavy Path to the Peak, the goal is to make it so that they can't set up regardless or even find the Drapion. So overall, though, the deck is very linear, which is another one of its problems. However, it is arguably one of the most consistent decks in the standard format, and also has the most degenerate strategy in the game, with Judge Path being able to beat anything. No matter how bad the matchup is, a turn 1 Judge can completely brick them out of the game. Judge Mew, still pretty good. Number 4. All right, let's get into number 3. Number 3 here, we have Lost Zone Toolbox. Now, there's a bajillion different ways to play Lost Zone, but I think that this is arguably the best one, so I'm just going to include this one on the list. I know that there are Radiant Charizard and also the Zamazenta build, which both are good, but I feel like it'd be a little bit redundant to have 3 or 4 Lost Zone decks in the top 10, so that's kind of the reason why I'm just going to put Lost Zone Box just in general at this number 3 spot. This is going to be the one that I think is the best out of all of them, which is going to be Turbo Lost Box. Your goal is to go as quickly as possible to aggressively use things like Dragonite, Raikou V, or Radiant Greninja on turn 1 or turn 2 to overwhelm the opponent. You still have Colress's Experiment and Comfy to be able to get tons of cards in the Lost Zone to pair up with that Mirage Gate. One of the nicest things about this deck, it has so many options. Being able to attack with pretty much your entire deck gives yourself room to outplay lots of matchups. This deck thrives against decks like Gardevoir, however, it can struggle to decks like Lugia VSTAR. This deck doesn't really have any great answer to their single prize attackers like Yveltal and Stonejourner, which is the biggest thing holding this deck back from being arguably the best deck in the standard format. However, it's incredibly consistent, and that's, I think, what makes it so good right now. Now, a lot of lists play 2 Forest Seal Stone. I like 1 along with 1 Sky Seal. I think Sky Seal is very, very good versus decks like Goodra VSTAR, Mew VMAX, and also Lugia. Specifically Lugia because they don't play Dunsparce for the most part anymore, or at least most lists don't and probably shouldn't play it, which is why I think the Raikou Sky Seal Stone is actually very, very relevant right now. So yeah, this is a deck that I think is absolutely fantastic, and I think that is the best Lost Zone variant just because of how consistent it is. Lost Zone Toolbox, specifically Turbo Lost Box at number 3. Let's go to number 2. Hopping to number 2 here, we have Gardevoir EX. Now, Gardevoir EX is arguably the best evolution-based deck, or stage 2 deck in the standard format. Now, I know that we had the other Gardevoir Mewtwo V Union build at number 7. I think this one is a little bit better for a couple of reasons. One, it's more consistent, and 2, it has the ability to attack on turn 2 with Rare Candy. This is going to be the list that Tord used to get 2nd place at the European International Championships, so shout out to them for doing so well. I think this is the best way to play Gardevoir as it gets the most out of the deck, in my opinion. Your goal is to use Kirlia's Refinement paired up with Gardevoir's Shining Arcana to be able to power up attackers like Zacian V and Cresselia and more. As you can see, the 2 Zacian is incredibly powerful versus decks like Duraludon, also great versus decks like Goodra VSTAR and Mew, as oftentimes you don't want to have to wait until the last turn to try and take those final 3 to 4 prizes. So being able to attack with a Zacian early game and then a Zacian at the end of the game is just really, really nice. Also means you'll typically never lose to prizing one, as you'll always have, one available. That was a big issue that I would sometimes run into, is when I need Zacian, it'd be prized and I wouldn't actually have a good attacker to attack with. So that's a big reason as to why the 2nd Zacian is really nice. Cresselia is really good in mirror match, being able to fling damage onto their bench Kirlias and take them out. It's also really, really strong versus the Lost Box, being able to damage things like Shining Arcana Gardevoir and then remove the damage, fling that, and knock out something like Sableye or Comfey is really good, so that later in the game you can attack with a fully healed up Gardevoir with 140 HP, which can be pretty difficult to deal with. Anyways, Gardevoir EX, incredibly powerful, has a lot of versatility, and can attack with so many different things in this deck. The only thing holding this deck back from being pretty much unstoppable is that it does run into consistency issues pretty frequently, which is what holds it back a lot of the time. But still one of the best decks in format. All right, let's get into number 1. Hopping to number 1 here, we have Lugia VSTAR Duraludon. Now, Lugia VSTAR with just the single strike in more or less one prize variant package was the number 1 pick going into EOIC for many players. However, due to Duraludon VMAX's rise in popularity, I think that you have to play your own now Duraludon VMAX in this list to be successful. Your strategy is to use Lugia VSTAR's Summoning Star to get the Primal Turbo Archeops out, which allows you to power up cards like Duraludon VMAX, Tyranitar, Yveltal, Stonejourner, and more. One of the nice things about this deck is versatility. You can attack with a bunch of different things. If you need to use something like the Duraludon to, beat, let's just say, a normal vanilla Lugia list, you have it. If you need to beat Mew VMAX, you got Tyranitar and Yveltal. If you need to beat Lost Zone Tool Box, you got Stonejourner and Yveltal. You pretty much have everything you need to beat any deck in the standard format. The biggest issue that this deck runs into is since you have to add in the Duraludon VMAX line, you lose a lot of consistency. In the past, Lugia VSTAR wanted to play a heavy 4-3 or 4-4 Lugia VSTAR line. However, you can't really do that anymore with the 2-2 Duraludon line injected into the list, which is the biggest issue holding this deck back. However, when it gets set up, it's pretty much unstoppable and can beat any deck in the format, which is why I have it at that number 1 spot. This is the list that Eric Rodriguez used to get top 8, and also Trevor Reed got top 8 as well at the European International Championships with a slightly different list. Overall, though, I think Lugia VSTAR is still the best deck in format and deserves its spot on this list, specifically at number 1. However, Gardevoir and Lost Zone Tool Box are incredibly close in contention for that number 1 spot, and I wouldn't be surprised if either of those decks took over number 1 in the next couple of weeks. But as of right now, Lugia holding on to that number 1 spot, but it's not as dominant as it used to be. Overall, though, still a great deck. Anyways, that's going to be my top 10 list. If you enjoyed and you think that this list was correct, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. If you think that there was something that should be changed, then let me know. Post that in the comments. I know that there were some decks that I couldn't include. That's kind of a good thing right now, because it shows that there's so many decks that can be competitively viable. So anyways, if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for all the support as always. This is Smart TCG, and I'll speak with you again soon. Peace out. If you're interested in improving your game, I do offer coaching on MetaFi. I'm one of the most successful players in the entire world, ranked in the top 20 worldwide, and I know what it takes to get there. If you're just interested about learning what coaching is, I do also have a free consultation where we can kind of go over exactly how I coach, like some of the plans that might be best for you, and what we need to do moving forward to make sure that you are as successful as possible. Just is going to be kind of a time for us to get to know each other and kind of go over exactly what coaching is. But I have all of my sessions here along with training plans, and if you have any more questions, don't hesitate to shoot me a message on MetaFi or any of my socials below. But just wanted to put that out there. If you are interested in improving your game, I do offer coaching on MetaFi, and if you have any questions, anything like that, all those links will be in the description. All right, thank you so much.